How does PwC take your company to the leading edge? They bring the sharpest minds in tech to your team, so you can bring the ideas that will transform your business. They're passionate about your industry, so you can walk into any room with every advantage. And they're with you every step of the way, so you can know you're headed in the right direction. PwC builds for what's next, so you can get there now. Get started at pwc.com/us/leading edge.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk, well, I know
Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to the Sooner Nation podcast. We do need to talk basketball because Oklahoma gets its first win in SEC, obviously the conference opener against Ole Miss. So we're got to talk about that, some advanced numbers and what it says about them. But then we're going to dive into the coaching search for a tight end. With that we're going to talk about, Oklahoma's aggressive push here in the transfer portal. So much to talk about. We're going to start with Hayden Hansen. And honestly, I know we're a few days late. We usually record, a few episodes here and there throughout the week, but things have been happening and information has been changing so rapidly since the transfer portal opened that it's hard. Like, I'll write an article for the website, heartland-sports.com, by the way. I'll write an article for the website. I'll put something up on our subscription page on Facebook. And honestly, by the time I hit publish, information's changed. And so it's been chaotic, but also it's been fun. And Oklahoma does snag the first player out of the transfer portal, getting a commitment from former Florida tight end Hayden Hansen, and quietly a critical portal win for the Sooners. And as we discuss this, let's start with the truth that doesn't always make headlines, but I think it absolutely wins games in the SEC. And that is the fact that stability matters. Not flash, not buzz, not vital portal graphics, but stability. And when you zoom out and you really evaluate Oklahoma's transfer portal cycle through that lens, one addition stands out as quietly critical to what the Sooners are trying to build moving forward, and that is Hayden Hansen. Now, if you're waiting for a program-altering superstar like Cam Coleman, not coming. I mean, that narrative is not coming, and that's not what this is. This is something that I think more important, though, especially for a team navigating its early years in the SEC. This is about solving a real problem with a real football player. And the tight end position, it became a pressure point for Oklahoma. And when they entered this 2026 cycle of the portal, the Sooners had a glaring issue that they didn't nearly get enough national attention. They essentially lost their entire tight end rotation. I mean, eligibility was exhausted. You've got transfers. You've got roster churn. However it happened, the result was the same. The Sooners were staring at an empty depth chart at a position that in the SEC, you just simply can't afford to ignore. Tight end, we've said this before, tight end's not a luxury position in this league. It is a requirement. It's protection. It's run integrity. It's a security blanket for quarterbacks when defenses become faster, longer, and more physical. And in Oklahoma, they didn't need just bodies. They needed someone who could immediately be trusted. And that's where Hayden Hansen enters the picture here. He is more than a plug-and-play transfer. On paper, I mean, he looks like a simple addition. 1 year of eligibility remaining, one position filled, but the context is so much more. He arrives to Norman, 34 starts under his belt, 37 career games played, started all 12 games for the Gators in 2025. And I think that matters for two reasons. Number one, he's experienced. And number two, he's experienced in the SEC. And there's a massive difference between projecting a player into SEC football and importing one who already understands it. At 6'8", 269, Hansen's a true inline tight end, not a hybrid, not a tweener, not a converted wide receiver. Florida used him the way SEC teams actually use their tight ends. They used him in the trenches. Over 70% of his snaps came as a blocker. And in 2024, Hansen did not allow a single sack in pass pro. That's not a flashy stat, but it's one that offensive coordinators, offensive line coaches, and quarterbacks, they're going to notice that stuff immediately. In a league that is defined by pressure, Hansen brings dependability at the point of attack, something Oklahoma badly needed. And understanding Hansen's production the right way, you can address the box score crowd quickly, right? No, Hansen's career numbers, they're not eye-popping, but they do tell you a story if you know what you're looking for. 3 seasons at Florida, 2023, 12 catches, 150 yards, 2 touchdowns. 2024, 15 catches, 207 yards, 1 touchdown. This last fall, 30 catches, 254 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's steady progression, not stagnation. More importantly, I think it reflects a player who understood his role and expanded within that. Hansen wasn't asked to be a focal point. He was just asked to be reliable. And that's exactly what Oklahoma is getting. They're getting a chain mover. They're getting a red zone target with an enormous catch radius, a tight end that quarterbacks trust on third down. Those players, they don't dominate highlight reels as much, but they win drives. And you got a recruitment that ended, pretty quickly. And that's one of the most telling parts of Hansen's portal process. It wasn't necessarily who pursued him. It was how fast this decision came together. Despite being ranked as a top 10 tight end in the 2026 portal, there was no drawn-out recruitment. There was no public shortlist. There was no official visit circus, no prolonged speculation. That's because Oklahoma checked the 2 boxes that mattered immediately to him. First was proximity to home. Hansen's a Weatherford, Texas native. Norman's just closer. And it is not just closer, it's familiar. I think the second thing here is immediate opportunity. There's no projection necessary here. Oklahoma's tight end room, wide open. This wasn't about, quote, winning a portal battle. This was about fit and aligning very quickly. And when that happens, decisions, they get made fast. And you got a guy with a skill set that fits the transition offensively that Oklahoma's making into the SEC. And I think here's where the addition really makes sense. He allows Oklahoma to be honest in its personnel groups. What I mean by that is he can block defensive ends without constant help from a running back chipping. He can stay on the field and run heavy sets. He doesn't tip play calls when he checks into the huddle or out of it. And those are things that really, really matter. Too often, particularly this last season, but the season before, Oklahoma had to substitute based on situation. And what that does is it telegraphs intent to your defense that you're playing against, and they feast on those tendencies. So Hansen helps clean that up. As a receiver, he's going to be efficient. He understands spacing. He shields defenders with his frame rather than just relying purely on separation. And probably notably here, he's worked with wide receivers during offseason training to improve his routes and speed, and that shows you a willingness to evolve. That fits perfectly with what Oklahoma wants that's tight end position to become. Again, it used to be this way, but they used to be versatile. They used to be dependable. They used to be multifunctional. Hansen allows them to return back because now you've got a guy that can make an immediate impact. And let's be blunt. Oklahoma needed this. Hansen walks into the building as the most accomplished tight end on the roster the very second he arrives. And he's not just expected to compete he's expected to secure the starting role here. And what that does is it allows the staff to develop younger players properly instead of forcing them into high leverage snaps before they're ready. From a schematic standpoint, Hansen gives Oklahoma continuity as well. He can stay on the field in early rundown sets, in play action concepts, in 2-minute offense. And again, that's continuity that is invaluable as the Sooners continue shaping what their offensive identity is going to be within this conference. And when you look at the bigger picture here, this is why he matters so much, because it's not a guy that's going to dominate headlines. Probably not a guy that's going to win the Mackey Award even. Not a dude that's going to trend a lot on social media, but what he does is he brings exactly what Oklahoma needs right now. SEC tested experience, immediate stability, a true two-way tight end skill set, leadership in a room that's being rebuilt. Oklahoma, they didn't just add a tight end, they added certainty at a position that desperately needed it. And this is a league where uncertainty gets you exposed very fast. So this may end up being one of the most important portal wins of the entire cycle for Oklahoma. And so when the transfer bus fades and the games start to matter, I wouldn't be surprised if Hayden Hansen's impact is felt every single Saturday. That's how winning is built, quietly, deliberately, and correctly. Hey, do us a favor before we move on in the podcast. Make sure you're finding where we are. iTunes, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you're following us. I know I said iTunes. I'm old. Apple Podcast, okay? Wherever you're picking us up, Spotify. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like it because that helps us gain traction. We love having you a part of the Sooner Nation podcast, and we love being a part of your Oklahoma information gathering family. We don't take that lightly. We appreciate you, but help us out with that as well. Show some love back. You know what I mean? We'll be right back.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn and I hire wrong. So our orders get all backed up. We're drowning in paperwork, then actually drowning, careless fighting off sharks with a stapler, and pirates are pillaging the office copier, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant goes beyond the resume, using unique insights to deliver a smarter shortlist. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
We're definitely going to have more transfer portal talk. I got some thoughts on the tight end coaching position that we're going to get into. And that's going to come up in the third and fourth segments of the podcast. But we do need to talk basketball. Oklahoma, Ole Miss, a win that I think matters more than the way it looked on Saturday, because, there are wins that get remembered because of how loud they are, right? And then there are wins that matter because of what they reveal. And when you look at Oklahoma's 86-70 victory over Ole Miss, I think it falls squarely in that second category. This wasn't a highlight reel night for the Sooners. It wasn't a shooting exhibition. It wasn't a moment where one player carried the entire operation on his back. It was, I think, something far more important than any of that, especially in January, especially here in conference play. It was instructional. Because what Oklahoma showed Saturday night wasn't just that it can play in this league. It showed that it understands how to win in this conference. And Ole Miss, they told you exactly what they wanted to do there in the first half. From the opening tip, Ole Miss made its intentions very, very clear. They didn't want tempo. They didn't want rhythm. They wanted discomfort. The Rebels came into Norman looking to slow the game down, kind of lean on Oklahoma physically, and see what happened when possessions became harder to earn. And for a while it worked. I mean, at halftime, Oklahoma led just by 2 points, 43-41. But then, the game felt uneven. The pace felt awkward. There were stretches where Oklahoma didn't look dominant. And, they did look functional, though. But I think here's the part that matters the most here. There was no panic. Oklahoma didn't force shots. The Sooners didn't speed the game up artificially, and they didn't abandon structure to chase separation. The Sooners played through this grind, and that's a defining trait for this team, again, particularly in conference play. And to me, the turning point of this game was pretty quiet. And I think that's an important point. Early in the second half, the game began to tilt. Not with a dunk, not with a run that was fueled by chaos, but just with execution. Xavier Brown hits a pull-up three, then another one. Ole Miss goes cold And then Wagi starts kind of just vacuuming up offensive rebounds. Possessions begin to stack, and you see the margin widen. Within 5 minutes, what was a 2-point game becomes a double-digit cushion for the Sooners, and Ole Miss just never truly reclaimed control. In that stretch, it didn't happen because Oklahoma changed who it was. It happened because Oklahoma did what it does better. And that's how conference games get decided. Xavier Brown, he didn't dominate, he controlled. And he's not always he's not always going to be like highlight package reel type dude. His game isn't built on spectacle, but against Ole Miss, he delivered exactly what wins in this league need. He delivered control. He picked his spots. He punished sagging coverage. He didn't rush the offense when things began to tighten. And when Oklahoma needed separation, Brown provided it without hijacking possessions. And there's, again, something that matters. This conference chews up teams that don't value possessions. And Brown didn't just value them, he dictated them. Mohamed Wagi, he owned the margins. We were worried. I was worried about foul trouble. The next breakdown, I'll talk about that. But, Brown, if he controlled the game from the perimeter, Wagi owned it in the margins. Ole Miss wanted to test Oklahoma inside. They wanted physicality. They wanted the game to feel heavy. Wagi didn't flinch. His offensive rebounds there in the second half, they were deflating. Not just because they created extra chances, but because they broke Ole Miss's belief that stops would eventually matter. There are a few things more demoralizing than forcing a contested miss and then still losing that possession. And Oklahoma did that repeatedly to the Rebels. And Wagi was the reason. This was a floor game for Oklahoma, not a ceiling game. You go back to that Stetson game, I think the second final non-conference game. I think that showed Oklahoma's offensive ceiling. But I think this game reveals something far more important right here in January. It revealed the floor. Oklahoma, they didn't need perfect shooting. They didn't need transition chaos or overwhelming athletic mismatches. The Sooners won just by being organized and physical and composed. And those are traits that repeat. And when you're in conference play, the floor matters more than the ceiling does. How far you drop, I think, is more important than how high you can rise. And Porter Moser just looked comfortable. And that's not nothing. I think one of the quieter storylines from the game on Saturday was the sideline. Moser didn't coach like someone hoping that his team wouldn't be exposed. He coached like someone who knew exactly what this game required. The rotations were patient, adjustments were subtle, mistakes didn't trigger panic substitutions. This wasn't a coach clinging to a script. It was a coach confident in his system. And that confidence, it showed up on the floor. Oklahoma didn't speed up the game when Ole Miss slowed it down. The Sooners didn't tense up when this game tightened. They just trusted the work. And that's what maturity looks like. And there's some numbers here you can talk about because they're loud. The final score says 86-70, but you look at these advanced numbers, I think they're going to tell you something much bigger. It wasn't just a solid SEC opener for the Sooners. I think it was a profile-altering performance. And you start with the headline stat here. Oklahoma had an offensive rating of 125. What that means is that Oklahoma scored at a pace of 125 points per 100 possessions. That's an elite number against any opponent, let alone in the conference play with size and length. So this wasn't fueled by unsustainable transition bursts or whistle-heavy stretches either. It was built on just shot quality. Oklahoma finished with a .608 effective field goal percentage. That's rare air. It means that the Sooners weren't just making shots, they were generating the right shots. Ole Miss couldn't sell out to the perimeter and they couldn't pack the paint. So they had to guard everything. And eventually when you have to guard everything, you don't really guard anything very well. And that balance is how elite offensive ratings happen. And that's exactly what you had from Oklahoma on Saturday. You look at the turnovers in this game, they were equal, but that favored Oklahoma. But both teams finished with identical turnover rates at 10.2%. At first glance, that feels neutral, right? But it wasn't. Because when possessions are equal, efficiency decides these games. And Oklahoma's superior shot quality meant every clean possession was more valuable. There was no rush to put the game away. The Sooners trusted the math here. If you shoot better on the same number of possessions, separation is going to happen. And that separation came swiftly right after the half. And you look defensively, kind of squeezing this game without gambling. Oklahoma held Ole Miss to a 101.8 offensive rating. So that doesn't necessarily scream chaos, but it does scream control. The Sooners didn't gamble. They didn't overextend. They didn't foul excessively. They forced late clock shots. They contested without losing structure. They stayed connected defensively. Ole Miss finished with a 459 field goal percentage. That's a number that reflects contested jumpers and uncomfortable possessions. Not positions, but possessions. It's the kind of defense that travels is what I'm saying. And you've got, a rebounding situation that didn't break your structure either, because Ole Miss actually won the offensive rebounding battle. They grabbed nearly 30% of their own misses. Normally that spells trouble, but context matters. Those extra possessions did not turn into momentum because Ole Miss couldn't convert efficiently afterward. Oklahoma absorbed the damage without letting it snowball. On the other end, Oklahoma didn't chase offensive rebounds aggressively either. And that was intentional. Their low offensive rebound rate reflected a philosophical choice. Now, this is my opinion. The choice was protect the floor, protect that balance, because the offense was already generating high-value shots. And that decision paid off. Individual efficiency elevated this whole thing. You look at advanced matrix, the reward system, so to speak, but systems still need precision. You go back to Xavier Brown. You've got efficiency, forced coverage adjustments from him. Nigel Pack's interior scoring stabilized possessions as well. Cool attack. We've talked about him. We called him out before the game on the breakdown. Those bench minutes, they prevented lineup drop-off. Wagee altered shots that didn't show up cleanly in the box scores. So Oklahoma didn't just survive rotation changes. It maintained efficiency through them. And that's rare, particularly for what we're used to in the past few seasons at the University of Oklahoma. And so I think this is a win for the Sooners that should be taken seriously. This game, it didn't prove Oklahoma's ready to run the conference, but what it did prove was something pretty valuable. Oklahoma is built correctly for this conference. This was a win grounded in repeatable traits, not in variance. And when teams win like that, those lessons, they stick. There's going to be louder wins this season. There's going to be bigger margins. There's going to be nights when Oklahoma looks more explosive, but this one, the first one, mattered because it wasn't about how good Oklahoma can be. It was about how stable that they already are. And in this conference, stability is not just helpful, it's pretty essential.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, you call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.
So let's jump back into football for the final two segments of this podcast. We're going to start with the tight end coaching search because I think this is a situation where we need to read between the lines just a little bit when you're breaking down these candidates, because when Oklahoma decided to move on from Joe John Finley, it wasn't just a box checking staff change. When you go inside the Switch Center, This has been viewed as something more intentional. A recalibration is kind of shaped by the reality of what they are in conference play. We talked about that in the opening segment. You look at the offensive evolution, you look at the growing understanding that the tight end position, it can no longer be treated as optional. And in this conference, we've talked about, we said it in the first segment, tight ends, they're not luxury pieces, they're stress points, they're conflict creators. And if you don't have them or you don't know how to properly use them, defenses are going to expose you, and they're going to expose you quickly. And so I think that's why, obviously, this hire matters. Quietly, it may matter more than any other offensive assistant decision that Oklahoma could make this offseason. This isn't just about replacing a coach. It's about redefining what the position is supposed to be. Historically, Oklahoma has treated tight ends as complementary. Useful, yes, but rarely foundational. That approach, it doesn't survive weekly collisions with Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M. And Brent Venables knows. He knows that better than anybody because he has spent years building defenses designed to eliminate predictable offenses. And so from his perspective, nothing complicates defensive game plans like a tight end who can block in line, flex out, motion, and win one-on-one matchups in space. And nothing simplifies things like a tight end who can only do one of those things. And that's the lens through which I think this search is being conducted. Internally, this is being framed as an elevation hire, right? Not a rebuild hire. Oklahoma wants someone who can immediately raise the floor of this room while aligning cleanly with Ben Arbuckle's offensive vision. So development matters, recruiting matters, but so does credibility. The kind of credibility that players feel the moment a coach walks into the room. So that framework, it's going to narrow the board quickly. And if you talk to people around the program, one name that constantly resurfaced as the cleanest fit here is Nate Byham. Byham, he currently Stanford's offensive coordinator and tight ends coach. He's not the offensive coordinator anymore, though. My notes are wrong. He got those responsibilities taken away. But he checks nearly every box here. Every box that Oklahoma's prioritizing, I guess. He's not just teaching technique. He's involved in building offenses, and that matters. So Oklahoma's not looking for a position silo. It's looking for integration. And Byham's background as a former tight end, it shows up here in the details: leverage, hand placement, route discipline, blocking angles, the fundamentals that allow tight ends to survive SEC fronts instead of getting swallowed up by them. And, from a guy who breaks down and studies and researches these things, the appeal here is straightforward. He understands the position at a granular level. He's accustomed to balancing recruiting with game planning, and he brings coordinator level vision without a coordinator level ego. So if Oklahoma wants the safest upside hire, the fewest compromises with the highest probability of success, Byham, he sits at the top of the board. I think another name that carries some weight here internally is Josh Henson. Now, Purdue's co-offensive coordinator and tight ends coach. He brings experience, versatility, and that matters more than I think what we often realize. He has coached multiple offensive structures. He's asked tight ends to block, to flex, to motion, and to contribute in the passing game. So there's adaptability there that mirrors what Oklahoma expects Arbuckle's offense to emphasize. So there's also an Oklahoma connection here as well. So relationships, they matter in recruiting. Regional familiarity matters, especially when you're walking into an Oklahoma high school, a Texas high school, and walking into people's living rooms. Hansen represents the high floor option. It's proven, reliable, someone who can align tight end development with offensive philosophy without needing a long runway. So if Oklahoma wants continuity over reinvention, Hansen fits that profile. There's also the NFL lane, and that's where you look at guys like David Rea. He can enter the picture currently coaching the tight ends for the Washington Commanders. He brings technical precision. NFL systems don't always translate cleanly into college roles. especially when recruiting enters the equation. But development-wise, this dude offers elite upside. His players are trained in the pro level route concepts, pro level blocking schemes, and preparation standards. That resonates with recruits who view Oklahoma as a launch pad for Sundays, particularly at a position where the NFL pathway is more clear than ever. This would be a calculated bet. The learning curve in recruiting is real, but Oklahoma's brand, it mitigates some of that risk. Rayo would signal that the Sooners want their tight ends coach like professionals from day one. And there's, then there's the swing for the fences option, right? You look at a guy like Nick Caley, resume that includes coaching elite NFL tight ends, including Gronk, and contributing to high-level passing game design. This would be a statement high risk, but a high reward. Realistically, though, pulling him away from the NFL, it's going to require significant alignment and negotiation. But people know Oklahoma's no longer hesitant to explore big swings if the fit makes sense. And you've got that connection with Nagy to the NFL. So, even with that, I don't think this is a likely outcome. But it's the type of name that tells you Oklahoma is thinking nationally, not just regionally. Now, while those names attract attention, searches like this often end up quietly. Rising assistants, under-the-radar developers, coaches who recruit well without hype. And I think Oklahoma's absolutely, they're going to evaluate that tier. And Venables has shown he values substance over splash. And, you look at names like Kevin Wilson. A new name here also is in this conversation is Ty Darlington. And that's not a nostalgia play. And, people are careful not to frame it that way. Darlington is not being labeled as a front runner in this, but his name has moved from the peripheral to worth a closer look. And at this stage of the process, that matters. He's currently serving as Tulsa's co-offensive coordinator. He's already in the state. He's coaching tight ends there as well. So Darlington's taking on expanded responsibility that includes, weekly game planning, schematic input, and that's a meaningful step forward from the analyst and support roles that he previously held at the University of Oklahoma. And, people who talk about his work describe him as highly prepared, teaching driven. I think importantly, he has direct tight ends coaching experience. You look at what he did at Incarnate Word in 2023, now at Tulsa. It differentiates him from candidates whose resumes lean heavily toward an analyst type experience. But from an institutional standpoint, I think the fit makes sense on paper. Darlington spent 5 seasons on Oklahoma's staff and in analyst and graduate assistant roles. He understands the program's internal expectations. As a former team captain and multi-year starter, that understanding is not just theoretical. And there's some credibility in his offensive line background. We've talked so much about how the tight ends must function as extensions of the line of scrimmage. And so that's non-negotiable. So Darlington brings that perspective naturally. But Oklahoma's not fast-tracking this. The questions are real. Power 4 on-field experience at the position remains a concern with Darlington. Immediate results matter in 2026. Scheme alignment with Arbuckle is still being evaluated. And Oklahoma's doing full due diligence, including off-the-field considerations. But I think when you look at this broader pool, there's so many names out there. We already mentioned Kevin Wilson, John Cooper, Ryan LePack, even Jason Witten. Darlington is best viewed as a developmental upside candidate here. But there's strong teaching ability. There's less certainty than more established other Power 5 options. And that ultimately, group of 5 options, But that ultimately tells you what this search is really about. Oklahoma is not chasing resumes. I think it's weighing fit, adaptability, long-term vision. So you strip away the names and the priorities are pretty clear here. They want elite development. They want offensive alignment. They want recruiting competence. And they want leadership that commands immediate respect. So this isn't about finding a stopgap, which makes me wonder, question Kevin Wilson's name being thrown out there. Because that's a stopgap in my opinion. This is about redefining a position that in this conference, Sooners can't afford it to be an afterthought. So the expectation internally is that once these interviews begin in earnest, I think this process is going to move quickly. Oklahoma understands this is important to stabilize the offensive staff really before more portal movement and spring, especially the spring evaluations before they all ramp up. But I think one thing's clear here. The Sooners, they're done treating the tight end as optional. And we know this. It can't be. And now I think Oklahoma's finally on board with that. Let's talk transfer portal, a couple more targets that are there, some people who were on campus, some people who are coming on campus. Who is Oklahoma still after? Who's the next guy that's going to make a commitment?
Wherever Bud goes, his harmonica goes with him. It's a pocket full of soul. Now he's living with prostate cancer. He asked his doctor about Xtandi enzalutamide. Xtandi 40 milligram tablets treats men with prostate cancer that has spread to other parts of the body and responds to a medical or surgical treatment to lower testosterone. Xtandi may cause serious side effects: seizure, a brain condition called PRESS, allergic reactions, heart disease that can lead to death, falls and bone fractures, swallowing problems, or choking that can lead to death. Stop Xtandi and get medical help at once if your face, tongue, lip, or throat start swelling. Tell your doctor at once if you faint, have a seizure, quickly worsening headache, decreased alertness, confusion, vision problems, chest pain or discomfort, or shortness of breath. Xtandi can cause harm to an unborn baby or miscarriage. Use birth control during and 3 months after Xtandi. Common side effects include muscle and joint pain, feeling unusually tired, hot flashes, constipation, less appetite, diarrhea, high blood pressure, bleeding, falls, fractures, and headache. Talk to your doctor and visit Xtandi.com.
Let's close this out by talking about Oklahoma's portal push and what this week really tells us. I think if you want to understand where Oklahoma football is right now, more importantly, where it's going, then you don't need rumors, message boards, or speculation. You just need to look at who's on campus and where the staff is applying pressure, because this portal cycle, obviously, clearly not random. It's not scattershot. This is Oklahoma not shopping. It's Oklahoma building position by position with the reality of who they want to be fully in mind. And you look at, when we started, the commitment of Hayden Hansen. It tells you exactly how this staff is thinking. He's not a splashy headline grabber, not a viral commitment, but he's something more valuable right now. He's a functional, physical tight end with Power 5 experience who fills an immediate need. And make no mistake, Oklahoma's needed that position stabilized. The Sooners are rebuilding the tight end room almost from the ground up, not just bodies, but identity. Hansen gives them a baseline, someone who can line up, block, understand structure, and allow the staff to keep recruiting without desperation. And that's the key word here. You get control. So this staff, they're not recruiting from panic. They're now recruiting from structure. And when you zoom out, because Hansen's just the first move in what's shaping up to be, I think, one of Oklahoma's most aggressive and telling portal stretches under Brent Venables. You start with tight end because that's clearly the focal point, but even after landing Hansen, Oklahoma's not done at that position. They're pursuing Tucker Ashcraft from Wisconsin. They're pursuing Rocky Beers from Colorado State, both of whom are expected to be or are currently on campus. And that tells you, again, something important, that this staff, they're not looking for a tight end. They're looking for a tight end room. They want numbers. They want competition. They want versatility. And they want options who can survive the type of defensive fronts you face in this conference. Not just catch passes in space. Rocky Beers in particular, I think this is a fascinating name. Yep, the family connection matters. His sister Reagan, star at the University of Oklahoma on the basketball team, but that doesn't guarantee anything. It doesn't remove friction. It doesn't, comfort is going to matter in portal recruiting. But beyond that, I think Beers fits what Oklahoma needs right now: maturity, physicality, and immediate usability. This is a staff that understands tight ends now. They don't usually develop overnight, and they know that. Older players with functional strength and game reps are going to matter. That's why Beers is viewed internally as a primary candidate for a quick decision. And even if Oklahoma lands him, don't assume that that ends the search, because depth is currency. Look at the trenches, because this is where the portal strategy becomes unmistakable. Defensive line, Oklahoma's targeting Cody Sigler from Arkansas State, and they've already offered Owen Waffle from Penn State. Not coincidence. This is need-based. Most, from what I'm hearing, is that Sigler is leaning towards Auburn, right? But he brings interior size. He brings experience. Waffle brings Big Ten reps and physicality. Oklahoma's not just looking for rotational bodies. They just announced David Stone's coming back. They're looking for players who can survive interior play without being liabilities. You know how the Sooners rotate that defensive front. And notice the sequence here, okay? Sigler, he's going to visit Auburn. But Oklahoma's going to respond. Oklahoma's not giving up on him. Waffle, he enters the picture. Oklahoma gets involved immediately with him. So Sigler's off at Auburn. Hey, we got this other option. The Sooners are being very aggressive here. And I think it tells you that this staff is actively monitoring leverage points. Who's gaining traction elsewhere? Who fits schematically? And where can they move fast? You're seeing the Nagy effect. Offensive line situation, I think, is urgent. Oklahoma lost multiple linemen to the portal. Good news is you got pretty much your starting 5 returning, but you can't sugarcoat losing all these guys. And instead of hoping young players develop faster than physics may allow, the staff is doing the smart thing. They're buying experience. You got Caleb Nida from Western Kentucky and Zach Conacher from Nevada. I probably said that name wrong. They're interested. They're on board. They're coming to take a look. Those aren't lottery tickets. Those are functional, experienced linemen who have played college football snaps and understand weekly preparation. Nida's visit is set for right about now. And it's particularly notable, though, because internally, again, this is a recruitment that's viewed as one that could move quickly. Not accidentally. That's not by accident. Oklahoma doesn't need stars here. They need stability. And you can't build an offense that Ben Arbuckle wants if you're teaching protection calls in March and in August. Running back. This is another quiet but critical storyline. You got Taylor Tatum, gone. Javonte Barnes, gone. Oklahoma needs answers. They've zeroed in on Lloyd Avant from Colorado State, and he's on campus. And I'm told that Oklahoma kind of is in the driver's seat here. I mean, he's being treated as a high priority target. And we kind of think that Oklahoma's poised to close this one and, again, close it quickly. Why? Because the staff values runners who can contribute immediately without reinventing the offense. Avant brings experience, physicality, and reliability. All the things that matter when you're navigating a new league and trying to protect your quarterback. It's not going to be about flash. It's going to be about functionality. Avant basically, hopefully, is going to be what they thought they were getting in Jaden Ott. A guy who can run with power, a guy who can catch out of the backfield, and a guy who can return kickoffs. So keep an eye on that. I think that for me, I think that's the guy who's most likely to be the next commitment. Linebacker. They've already hosted Cole Sullivan from Michigan. I think momentum is real here. Michigan wants to keep him, but Oklahoma's pushing hard here. People have said that the Sooners are surging in his recruitment, and that language doesn't get used lightly. Sullivan fits what Venables wants. He's got the range, he's got intelligence, he's got adaptability. And the fact that Oklahoma is applying pressure now tells you that they believe they can close while leverage exists here. Looking ahead, you got the Gideon Lampering guy from Bowling Green. He's scheduled for a visit coming around January 9th, I believe. That's another indicator of depth building at the linebacker position, not just chasing one single solution. The defensive backfield, Dakota Fields from Oregon is on campus. Again, that's a visit that matters because Oklahoma wants length and athleticism. They want that conference capable body in the secondary, and Fields brings Pac-12 experience. He brings Big Ten experience. Just there's a developmental upside, and then that extended visit window suggests mutual interest. He's not just here for one day. Receiver, you got to make a decision there. Isaiah Satania looks like he's coming back, which is great news for Oklahoma. But this position doesn't really get talked about urgently. Kim Cameron's not coming. The Livingston guy from Texas, I don't think he's coming. But Oklahoma's been linked to Terrell Harris from Virginia, Trey Richardson from Vanderbilt. And these are exploratory conversations right now, not imminent commitments, but let you know Oklahoma's casting a wide net. That, the staff is evaluating whether they want to add another veteran presence to stabilize this room. I think they do. And who's it going to be? But I think that lets you know that this is a comprehensive rebuild, not reactionary. And you tie all this together because the big picture is going to matter. What Oklahoma's doing right now, it's not chasing stars, not winning headlines. It's raising the floor of this roster. We've used that raise the floor thing quite a bit now in this episode. You got a staff who understands something that gets lost in portal discourse. Conference success, in the SEC particularly, it's built on depth, redundancy, and competence. You don't need every transfer to be a starter. You need every transfer to be playable. That's the philosophy that's kind of driving this cycle for Oklahoma. And when you look at the list of likely next commitments, I think Avant, I mentioned him, Cole Sullivan, Rocky Beers, Caleb Nitta. There's a clear through line there. These are players Oklahoma believes can contribute immediately while younger talent develops. And that's how programs survive transitions. That's how you avoid getting overwhelmed in October. That's how you build sustainability. Obviously Hayden Hansen, that commitment's not the finish line. That's the first brick in what they're building. And based on what's happening right now in Norman, this staff's not slowing down. They're closing, and the rest of the league, I think, needs to be paying attention. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Sooner Nation podcast. Again, if you like our breakdowns, if you like what we do, make sure to subscribe, leave us a review, follow us on social media. We've got a massive Facebook community that's building 16,000 plus. We'd love you to be there. Look us up, Heartland Sports. We got a lot of Oklahoma Sooner coverage, a lot of Oklahoma City Thunder coverage. And we're going to be back with more. It's going to be a fun week. Make sure you enjoy it. Boomer Sooner.
But I would walk 500 miles and I would walk 500 more to be the man who walked 1,000 miles before that should do. When I'm walking, yes, I know I'm gonna be the man who's working hard.